Good morning. Today I am talking to Will Harker. Hi, Will. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, my pen name is Will Harker. My real name is William Hussey, and I write young adult books under William Hussey, and that's one of them, Hideous Beauty. And this one is coming out in May 13th, The Outrage. And as Will Harker, I write crime thrillers with Scott Jericho, a new detective. Actually, that's the second book. So I'm incompetent at holding up books, clearly. And this is the first one, Killing Jericho. So yeah, I've been a published author for 10, 11 years, I think. And that's my main job. Yeah.
Did you always want to write?
I did. So from a really early age, I loved telling stories. And it all started for me, I've told this story loads of times, but at primary school. So I got from my dad for a birthday present a bunch of Tales from the Crypt comics. I don't know whether anyone remembers those, but and I love them. So what I did was I started writing and drawing my own horror comics. And I did this until I got to secondary school. And at secondary school, I had like this brilliant English teacher called Mrs. Breeds. And the thing with Mrs. Breeds was she was really good, really encouraging, but she also was like super honest to the point of being, you know, that's a bit much for an 11-year-old. But so she called me into her office when I first started secondary school and said, I hear that you write and draw these horror comics. Will you bring them in, show them to me? She read them all. I went into her office at the end of the week and she said, I think you got a bit of a knack for telling stories. So you need to improve your pacing and stuff, because at the moment, everyone is being brutally murdered on page 2. So there's no tension and there's no suspense, there's no build up. There's a lot of stuff you need to improve, but there's one thing you can't improve, and that's your drawings. And I kind of puffed out my 11-year-old chest and I thought, yeah, because they're awesome. And she looked at me and she said, these are the worst drawings I think I've ever seen in my entire life. She said, even the stick figures in the back of your compositions don't look like stick figures. So that's how rubbish you are at drawing. So just give up on the idea that you're going to be doing comics or anything. It was pretty devastating, but she was right. I was terrible. So she said, turn them into short stories. And that's what I did. So like virtually every writer, I think we all start with little stories scribbled in the back of yeah, so that's how it really all started. And yeah, I've just been annoying my so I annoyed my family for the next 10 years with stories before I was unleashed on the public.
And what made you take the plunge and go for it properly?
Well, it was I trained as a solicitor and I really hated it. So it was a moment actually that I was at work and I'd been given a job. I was like very early on in my career and I'd been given a job. I was in the property department at that time. And my job, we were working on behalf of like a landlord, and he wanted to evict these 2 young women who had set up a nursery, which was really needed in that particular area. And my job was to draw up the papers to get them evicted. And it was awful. I felt absolutely terrible. And I thought, is this what I want to do in my life? You know, and I actually went home at lunchtime, was watching the news, and there was an interview with the head of the MA in creative writing at Sheffield University. And I just thought, and weirdly, I had an appraisal that afternoon to see how I was going, like 6-month appraisal. So I went in to see my supervisor in the afternoon, and they said, oh, we're happy with your progress and everything. I said, right, before you go any further, I'm quitting and I'm going to do creative writing instead. And no one could believe it. Like, they were just like, are you sure you've worked really hard for this? And my family were just crazy. But I always say to kids, because I do a lot of creative writing classes in schools, I always say to them, when you're on your deathbed at the end of your life and you look back on your life, you will never ever say, I wish I'd earned more money. You will always think, I wish I'd done what I'd wanted to do. I wish I'd just followed that dream, whether it works out or not. I wish I'd given it a go. And that was a moment for me where I just thought, I'm probably not going to earn as much money being a writer as I was a solicitor, but that's what I want to do. And I don't want it to evict people who are trying to do good things.
Yeah. Oh. So what came first? Was it the young adult books?
I'd written 2 adult horror novels first, which was set in the Fen country, which is where I live in Lincolnshire. And I've always been interested in the mythology and the legends of the Fen area. So those were the 2 adult novels that I wrote. And then I've got a friend, Debbie, who is the wife, if anyone is reading, there's some really good crime novels at the moment, Alex Scarrow. And he's a YA writer as well, but Debbie is his wife. She wasn't his wife then, but I met her at Boston Waterstones, and I was doing like a book club thing for my adult books. And we were talking, she loves YA children's fiction, and she was the bookseller there for that. And we were talking about it, and I said, and she basically challenged me, but she said, writing for kids is much harder than writing for adults because they're such a discriminating, unforgiving audience. If they're bored, that's it. They're not going to be polite and just give you another 10 pages of reading. So I then wrote a trilogy called Witchfinder, which was published by Oxford University Press, and I've just republished them as ebooks. But they were kind of like a supernatural adventure series for young adults. Virtually every mythology you can think of is in there. So folklore, witches, ancient Greece, you know, the Norse mythology, everything is in that trilogy. And so I loved writing YA. And then what happened, I wrote a few more of them. And then in 2016, so I was a carer for my mum for a long time, and she passed away in 2016. I was really close to my mum. And in the year afterwards, I was just grieving so much, and I needed an outlet for it. And I felt like I needed to write a story that dealt with grief. And so I started writing a story, Hideous Beauty, about 2 boys who fall in love at the beginning of the book, and then by about chapter 4 or 5 an accident happens, one of them dies, and it's really it's a mystery. It's a little bit like a detective story because Dylan, the hero, is trying to piece together what happened to Ellis, his boyfriend. But it's really a story about grief and how you come to terms with losing someone that is crucial and central to your life. So weirdly, I think it was really therapeutic to write that book. And then after that, I kind of like, this is a really long answer to your question, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
After that, I love detective stories. I love crime novels. I was a massive Agatha Christie fan growing up. Like, when I was like 13, like, you know, other 13-year-old kids would be asking for skateboards or kind of like to go to Disney World or whatever. Do you know where I asked my parents to take me when I was for my 13th birthday? To Devon, so that we could visit Agatha Christie's house. I was such an Agatha Christie nerd. I still am. But so I really wanted to write a detective story. I'll probably go into this a bit later, but I really wanted to write a detective story with some surprise, twisty endings. So that is the very long answer to your question.
I'm glad you mentioned Hideous Beauty because I wanted to ask you about that anyway. And it's been nominated for an award, which it deserves because it's amazing, and ruined me completely for about an hour after I finished it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're not.
No, I'm not really. No.
Not just me either, is it? Is it Caroline of UK CBC? It made her cry as well.
Yeah, it was really interesting, that book, because I'd written like these horror books before, and I knew I could effectively make people scared or unnerved, but I wasn't sure I could make people cry. And it's not like that's the thing I set out to do, but I wanted it to be emotionally genuine. And so I sent it, the first draft I sent to a friend of mine, Alex Bell, who's like this amazing children's writer. And I think I'm right, she was getting married like that week or. So I sent her the book and she was reading it on her phone, and her fiance, so there were mad wedding arrangements and everything. Her fiance came in and she got to the funeral scene in Hideous Beauty, and she was crying so much she couldn't explain to him that no one had died. It was, the wedding wasn't off or whatever. But basically she just read this book. So when I was saying, oh, I don't know whether it's going to work, or I don't know whether I can move people, she like reassured me, and I felt bad and reassured. So.
Yeah, it was weird because, usually if I'm going to cry, I know I'm going to cry, but when I finished it, I was just crying. I was like, what the hell?
Oh.
Yeah.
It's
yeah. What's the award it's been nominated for?
So it's the Crime Fest award. It's a bit of a mouthful. So it's the Crime Fest Award, Best Young Adult Crime Novel for 2021. I had to think what year it was then. Yeah, and it was a little bit of a surprise really, because it is. I shouldn't say anything because I don't want to spoil it for anyone, because it is a crime story, but it isn't. So I'm not going to say any more, because I'll just give away the ending if I say too much. But yeah, I was really surprised by that one. We did go up for a couple of awards and we didn't get them, in the young adult kind of awards categories throughout the year, like the Carnegie and things like that. But there were so many brilliant books published last year. But that would be the one that I would have never thought we would have got nominated for, and we did. And it's really exciting, being a massive crime fan anyway. It's a huge compliment. So yeah.
Do you get much chance to read?
Yes, in fact, I have no clue how anyone has survived the past year who doesn't read. I put like a tweet out about this, and it was like, my last thing at bed, I have my like hour, or if I'm really enjoying it more, and I also read during the day at lunchtime, whatever. But I said, how do people go to bed without escaping into a different reality? With everything that's going on, I just need that fictional space, even if it's like a horrible serial killer, thing. At least it's not the world now. And yeah, so I read all the time. I don't know how. I do know, like, I've heard of them anyway. I don't know them, but I have heard of writers who don't read fiction but write fiction, which is a really interesting process. I don't know how they do it, because I just basically. I really do a terrible thing, so I hope people watching this don't hate me, but I don't think books are sacred objects that should never be touched, or or whatever. Or so what I do, and if I really love a book, I'll just buy another copy of it. But if I love a piece of writing, I will mark it up in my book, and I will put notes in the margin as to why I think it's effective and how I love it, because that helps me as a writer. But I know people, you've written in a book, they would absolutely, that would be like a capital offense for some people. So, but no, I think it's crucial for my mental health, reading, and it's crucial for my job. So we're always learning as a writer to do better. So,
and what sort of things do you read? Will you read anything, or do you stick to crime fiction?
I read absolutely more or less anything. So horror, crime, spy novels, young adult novels. I read romance. I've done, little secret, like most thriller, probably this from interviewing them and everything, but like most crime and thriller writers, we write these kind of like scary, books and everything, but soft as butter, really sentimental, most crime writers, and cry at the drop of a hat. And I think I said in another interview that whenever you meet crime and horror writers, they're like the most sociable, lovely group of people, because they get all their nastiness and dark thoughts out on the page. But yeah, I'm an absolute sucker for a kind of like a weepy story as well. So I really read everything. I can't think of anything I don't really read. So yeah.
Awesome. So your Scott Jericho novels is an unusual sort of main character. So do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so I'd been thinking about this for a while because I grew up in the traveling fairground community. And I kind of like the first few years of my life was in that community. So we'd be on fair, we'd travel all around like London and the home county, setting up affairs and stuff. And that sounded like I said setting up affairs. I mean, setting up fairs, not setting up affairs. That's weird. That'd be a weird job. And I've always thought a showman would make a brilliant detective because unlike most things now, the fairground is a great social melting pot. Everyone comes to the fair. So showmen are great. They kind of talk to lords and dustmen and everyone in between. So they know human nature backwards. So that was a great attribute for a detective, to know human nature. Their observation skills are brilliant. They know immediately, they know the rhythms of the fair, but they can weigh up a punter, see whether he's spent his money for the day or whether he's still got money to spend. They can look at the clothes or the accent and really sum up a person. So the observation skills are there. And they're just kind of like, because they've been oral storytellers for so long as well, they're great at gaining people's confidence. So you need that. If you're a showman, you need someone to, you need to be able to pull in the punters, get them on your side, get them to like you, so they'll come over to your stall or your ride. And so all of those three things I thought would make a brilliant detective. And also I've read books which have been set in fairground and traveller communities, but I've not read one yet that has been written by someone who's lived that life and knows those people. And what I wanted to do was to have this detective, but also show his world and show it warts and all. So all of the great stuff. So the solidity of that community, how they will always take back their own and look after them and look out for them. But also the fact that in a weird way, they're quite a conservative community. And so Scott, who's LGBTQ, that is an issue for him growing up within that community. So, and the other thing I think is that from an outsider's point of view, people who go to the fair, there's always like a little tingle of the unknown there. It's a way of life that's still very hidden. So it lends itself to a sort of gothic intrigue, a sense of danger, just below the surface. So I thought, yeah, all of those things melt together into hopefully an interesting series of books.
And when you wrote the first one, were you planning on writing a series?
Yeah, so I thought there was kind of like scope and longevity in it. And once I got into it though, so Harry, who is a character who crops up about a third of the way through book one, wasn't intended to be in the book. He just suddenly appeared, and he has a relationship with Scott, and I think that is what is motoring the kind of B plot through all of these books, is the relationship between Scott and Harry. And what's been really surprising to me is that people have messaged me after reading it and say, "Oh, I'm really fascinated by Scott and how his mind works and his background." But they've said, "We love Harry though." It's like they adore Harry more than Scott. And I've now had people say, if you kill Harry, we're coming after you, basically. So yeah. So I'm warned, but
yes, I am one of these people. Do not touch Harry.
I know. I kind of like the only thing I promised is I won't hurt Webster, which is Scott's dog, because he's a lovely old boy, but I won't hurt Webster. But if you're in kind of like Scott's world, this is what he reflects on a lot though, is that the other thing with this character is like he attracts darkness and danger to him and violence. So that is why he's concerned about Harry being with him, because he knows the fallout of his cases could hurt the person he loves most. And it's like a balancing act for Scott. He wants the stability and love of Harry, but he doesn't want to endanger him either. So, but something is going to happen in book 3. That's all I'm going to say. At the very end of book 3, something is going to happen between them. So for good or ill, it's going to be a big change in their relationship.
If you kill him, I will find you.
God, I'm so scared now. I'm not saying anything. Okay.
No. I can wait. I'm very patient.
It won't be long. I think I'm hoping book 3 is going to be out. I had a slight delay in my writing, but I'm hoping it's going to be out for July. And I ran a poll on Instagram for the title. So we've got the title now. It's going to be Burying Cain. So that's going to be. So each of the titles so far have had like a verb as the first word. So we've had Killing Jericho, Silencing the Dead, and Burying Cain. And someone said to me the other day, you just got to be careful that you don't kind of trap yourself with these titles, because if you get to like book 8 or something, and then you're really scrabbling around in it, it's kind of like, what are you going to do? Running with giraffes, or you can't think of another verb. So.
How much of yourself is in Scott?
He's gay, like I'm gay. He grew up with that difficult situation with his family and his community, which reflects kind of me. He's like curious. He loves mystery. He's addicted to mysteries and puzzles, which I am. I guess that's probably where the similarities end, though, because he's like brave, stupidly brave. Actually, it's like sometimes I think, is he being idiotically brave? This kind of situation, but he just rushes in where angels fear to tread. That's not me at all. I'm not as brave as him. He's also like stunningly good looking, so that's a kind of like everyone kind of like, so that's a difference. What else? Yeah, the other thing though is he's actually got about the same dress sense as me, which is basically just white or black t-shirt and jeans, and that's it. He's very troubled. He kind of has, when we first meet him, although he's kind of got over it to a certain extent now, he has some substance abuse issues. That's kind of nothing that I've dealt with. But yeah, and also he's much, much cleverer than me. So the thing is, it's all right for me as the writer to think I'm clever, but it's actually taken me kind of like months to put the plot together and the twist and the clues, whereas he like works it out. If you look at how long the story, I think both Killing Jericho and Silencing the Dead take place over about a week, and he works it all out in about a week. So yeah.
Who's been your favourite character to write out of any of your books, not just those ones?
Oh, okay. That's a tricky one. I think probably it was Mike in Hideous Beauty, and which is weird because he's not. I think Hideous Beauty weirdly has 3 main characters, but if you were to define it absolutely, he's not really the main character. But Mike is based on my best friend from childhood, Trev, who is like there for you. 3 o'clock in the morning, what do you need? I'll be there for you. And he's really that straight best friend that a lot of gay kids would really want growing up, the one who's going to defend you and be there for you. So it's easy actually to say that probably, I love kind of like Scott in the Jericho books. I love Harry. In the new book, The Outrage, I've got a character called Albert, who I think is on par with Mike. He's another kind of like secondary character until you get to the last bit of the book. But what I love is the characters that surprise you. So I wouldn't have thought, when I started writing Hideous Beauty, I would have thought it had been Dylan or Ellis. When I started writing The Outrage, I would have thought it had been the 2 main characters, Gabe or Eric. And with Jericho, as I say, Harry just pops up and then takes on a life of his own as well. So it's often the characters that you don't think are going to be central, or don't even imagine that they're going to exist in the book when you start. So yeah, but if I really had to choose, I'd say Mike.
Yeah, I loved Mike. Mike was awesome.
He's the friend everyone wants, isn't he? And my editor was like, she also wanted to be adopted by Mike's mom and dad as well.
Yeah, me too. Is there any book that you ever wish that you could be a character in?
Oh goodness, well, because I like crime and horror so much, probably none of those, because something horrible would happen to me. Oh, that's such a really interesting question. So I've got a friend who's a writer, who's brilliant, and if anyone hasn't read his books, they're so joyful and funny. Simon James Green. So he writes LGBTQIA, and basically I just want to be a character in any of his books because they're so joyous and you just end them with a big grin on your face. So probably not Noah, who's like the hero of his first book, because he's so accident prone and you know, but yeah, he is actually, maybe I did this subconsciously, I don't know, but Noah's boyfriend is called Harry, and I really love that. So maybe I totally stole Harry off Simon James Green. I don't know. He's the grown-up Harry, maybe. But, yeah.
Maybe it's the biggest compliment. I don't know.
I'd also quite like to be Miss Marple, which sounds a bit strange, but I really would. You know, like towards the end of my life, just being like in a village where strange murders happen all the time, but very genteel. And then you just kind of sit back and have, you know, endless amounts of cups of tea and gossip with the old ladies of the village and solve murders. That sounds like a great retirement to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally with you on that. Do you ever dream or have nightmares about your characters?
I used to. I haven't really for quite a long time, but I often dream elements of a story which will then show up in the story at some point. Hideous Beauty, did have a dream about a car accident where a car was sinking and one person was able to get out but couldn't get the other person out. So that was a thing. In The Outrage, this was kind of inspired by a real life thing. So I was reading an article, and I can't quite remember where this story was set, but it may have been Iran or somewhere like that. And this was the inspiration for The Outrage. So The Outrage is basically set in a future Britain 30 years from now that will become a fascist state where being LGBTQ is illegal. And there are a police force dedicated to hunting down gay people and sending them to state-sponsored conversion camps. So I was reading this article in which these two men had like what would have been in their country an illegal relationship for like 10 years, and they were found in a moment of intimacy and exposed. Now there was this get out of jail in a way free card that is held out where they were interrogated separately, but if one said that they had been attacked by the other one in that moment, then they will be set free, but the other will be executed. And they'll both know that, but so the outcome would be both of them executed or one of them. And I thought that was such an interesting dilemma to put two people in who absolutely love each other. And what would you do? Would you be the person, and how you'd want the other person to say that they were attacked by you so that they could live, but still, how would you feel if that person did it? So I had a nightmare about being in an interrogation cell after reading that, where that was being asked of me, and so that provided a scene. And the other one, which I don't want to go into spoilers too much, was a nightmare I had for killing Jericho. where someone had had their eyes removed and something had been put there to replace the eyes. And I won't give, when people get to that bit in the book, it's like in the last kind of like fifth of the book, it's quite an image, I think. So
yes, it is. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
you'll never look at, someone emailed me and they said, you've out-itted it with carnival balloons. So that was quite a compliment.
But what's the most interesting thing you found when researching?
I think it probably has to be what, you know, that story that I just said about the two men, because that fired an entire book. It's very rare that you get a point where in research where an entire book will come to you off of one bit of research. But I guess it was that I do research my books a lot before I start, but I think we chatted earlier about the fact that two things I would say as a writer about research. One is it feels like work, but no one is going to pay you for your research notes. So as you know, writers are the biggest, will do anything to get out of writing as writers. So we go, oh, well, I could just do a little bit more research. Well, you always know in the back of your head when you've done enough research and you're ready to begin, and really you're just wasting time. So listen to that little voice, because as I say, you're never going to get paid. The book is not going to get written if you just keep doing that. The other thing is, with research, it should serve the story. So not everyone agrees with me, but for me, if you come across a bit of research that in the real world something wouldn't happen, but you can make it believable within your story, and really it needs to happen that way in the story, because for the plot and for the characters to move on and develop in their relationship or develop the story, then really reading is suspension of disbelief anyway. So don't be a slave to research is my thing, you know, because readers primarily are not there for your research. They're there for your characters and your story. Obviously, if you're going to do something completely ridiculous that would never happen in the real world, then that's fine, because then you've broken the suspension of disbelief. But I think I said to you earlier, like, if, for example, as a crime writer, you need to wait 5 days for a bit of DNA to come back, but that's really just holding up the plot really badly, and your characters are not doing anything or going anywhere, then I think you can cheat a bit and just say we got the DNA back a bit earlier.
What's your biggest goal or your biggest dream?
Well, it'll sound a little bit kind of like self-centered, but we had a TV deal for Hideous Beauty, and it was all going ahead and it was all going swimmingly and everything, and then COVID struck, and we're going back out with Hideous Beauty to other producers and things, but I just think it's a really televisual book, and I could the plans that the producers had for it were really amazing. Like, they were going to be so faithful to the story and everything. So I think my absolute dream would be that book more than anything, because I think it's got some important messages in, especially for younger readers and younger viewers and stuff. So that would be my absolute dream, to see that on the screen in some way or other, but we shall see. But other than that, that's quite a big ambition. So mainly my ambitions are just to have some cake at the end of the day, you know, quite small scale stuff, really.
Yeah, I see your tweets quite often about whether you should have cake or exercise, and generally it's quite a majority of eating cake.
I know, I should just listen to the majority. So I'm I'm definitely having pizza later anyway.
What else do you like to do when you're not writing?
Well, usually in non-plague world, I love the theatre. I just think it's really heartbreaking. I've got like lots of friends in the theatre. It's just heartbreaking what's happened to theatre. I love cinema. So hopefully we can all get back to that communal kind of experience of being in the theatre and in the cinema. I just kind of, really simple things like, because writing is such a lonely job, you're just by yourself kind of all day. A kind of thing, a crucial thing for my mental health is just generally kind of meeting with friends, regularly, getting out of the place that I live, because I care for my dad, and that's a big job as well. So just getting away for a weekend and seeing friends and stuff. So it's, as for everyone, it's just been really tough this year. So really, it's just been the writing this year, and not much fun. So, but yeah, theatre is a big one. Can't wait to get back in the theatre. And blooming COVID has also denied us. So I don't know if you saw it. So just the last show I saw before the first lockdown was Everybody's Talking About Jamie, which I absolutely loved. And then the film was made. I was like really excited to see that, and that was coming out in October or November, and then that was delayed. So I don't know when we're getting that, but yeah, it's a real killjoy, COVID, isn't it?
Big time. Yeah, I had tickets to see a couple of comedians. The lockdown happened in March, and I think April and May, and I think it's 2022 now that they've been rebooked till.
Yeah, it's going to be, I don't know whether we're going to get back to stuff this year. Might see.
No. Yeah, we'll see. What's the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to you?
Oh my God, we need a 5-part interview for this. I once proposed to my tutor at university after they told me that they were getting married, and then sat in a cake. After I got refused, after I got turned down, I then kind of flopped down into a seat and someone had put a cake on it. So that was quite embarrassing. So the next day I had to buy them a new cake and apologise. Oh my God, I've done so many embarrassing things. I sometimes think my life is just, this is why I like writing, because I have control of the environment. Whereas I'm sure everyday life is out to get me and make me look ludicrous in every kind of like way it possibly can. So yeah, I think the cake story takes some beating, but as soon as we finish the interview, I'll think of about 10 other things that have just been hideously embarrassing.
Who is your first celebrity crush?
Probably, oh my goodness, let me think. Ryan Felipe is definitely up there. You know what, this interesting thing on a slightly more serious subject. I've done a kind of like little interview about the outrage and how important LGBTQ representation is in like films and TV and stuff like that. Because I grew up in Lincolnshire, which is a very conservative place anyway, and during Section 28, so there was no, Section 28 basically, for people who don't know, was a law that forbade teachers to talk about gay people in schools, to say that, basically gay people are okay and not hideous, plague carrying monsters, which is like all we really got in the 90s. And we couldn't have materials in schools about sex education or relationship education for gay people. So all I really saw on the screen represented of gay people were clowns to be laughed at in sitcoms, or serial killers, or something sinister. So that's all you got. And I think if this is really what the outrage is about, if you can see yourself represented on screen, or your community as with worth, as a real human being, as a complex person, then that really can totally change your life. So growing up, we really didn't have any of that. So what a lot of my generation of gay people did was we projected onto straight rom-coms. So, you know, like with Ryan Felipe and people like that, you just project yourself into that and situation. But, oh God, so many. Yeah, Ryan Felipe, definitely. Who else? Early days, Matthew McConaughey. I think he's become a bit of an alt-right person now. I don't know, but anyway. And yeah, lots of. Do you know, I had a real crush on who was it? It's an old-time movie star who, and I used to go around my nan's, and she used to, Sidney Poitier. Sidney Poitier? That's a really weird one, isn't it? My nan loved Sidney Poitier and used to go around, and you know, when I was really young and happened we were really young, and just, but he was such a beautiful human being as well. But yeah. Yeah, strange selection that, really, isn't it? Really?
It's quite varied, yeah. So if you were to invite 4 famous people to a dinner party, who would you invite?
Is this living people, dead people, fictional?
It's your
people?
dinner party, you can have whoever you want.
Right, let's think then. I'd love to invite, I'm a bit of a politics nerd, so I would quite like Clement Attlee, because I think he is the greatest Prime Minister we ever had. You know, that post-war government that changed the fabric of Britain for the better. So, and he was, you know, when you see interviews with him, he comes across as a very ordinary, approachable guy, very quietly spoken, not the big bombastic kind of politicians that we have now who just all sound and fury and signifying nothing. So I think he would be fascinating to talk to. Agatha Christie, obviously, so I could pick her brains and steal some plots off her. Who else? Yeah, so I think I'd have to say Stephen Fry, just because there's not a subject he can't wax lyrical about, and so that'd be really, and also because I'm a big P.G. Wodehouse fan as well. I'd love to talk to him about Jeeves and Wooster and all that kind of stuff. So I've got one left, haven't I?
Yeah.
Let me see. I think I don't know whether this person would be a good idea, because I think he'd upset people. But although I don't agree with like everything he says, I've always admired his bravery for saying what he thinks. And so the late Christopher Hitchens, I think, would be, he'd drink the house dry, but he might get into an argument with the other people kind of around the table. But I think he would be, at least it wouldn't be a dull dinner party with Christopher Hitchens anyway.
No, I think Stephen Fry could probably hold his own anyway. He doesn't back down, does he?
No, and I think they were friends actually in real life as well. So in real life, they're both real human beings, kind of like. But yeah.
And Stephen Fry knows everybody anyway, doesn't he?
Exactly. So he could bring people along as well. You know, I'm bending the rules here, but.
It's fictional, who cares?
Yeah. One person who I'd really like to come along as well, because I love his books, and anyone who's read the Jericho books can probably see a bit of influence. I've met him as well, and he is just one of the nicest people. Is John Connolly, the writer who writes the Charlie Parker books. So he's a very kind guy, fascinating, just so clever. So I know now I've chosen 5, so I'm cheating.
That's fun. So what are you working on at the moment, and what's coming next for you?
I'm working, and I really need to get myself in gear, but I'm working on Jericho 3. So I'm at that stage where I just need all the little plot and clue elements to kind of come together properly. So a few of them are being a bit obstinate, but I'm working on that. I've sent in, so I always want to do something different. I don't want to write the same thing every single time. So Hideous Beauty, for my YAs, I describe them as LGBTQ romances, but in a slightly different genre each time. So Hideous Beauty is obviously a mystery, and the outrage is like a thriller, like a chase thriller. So I thought, right, I'm going to challenge myself, and hopefully, if Osborne, my publisher, go for it, LGBT romance, but a complete madcap comedy. So I've got an idea for it. Basically, it's about a boy who has to have open heart surgery. And I had open heart surgery in October 2019. And so I've got the big zipper scar there. And there's a big thing in gay culture and queer culture about body perfection, and I think it's really poisonous and toxic, but it's so projected, especially onto young people. So I've got this kid, and he's a lovable dork, and he loves films, and his thing is that he wants to make a zombie movie over the summer before he has this surgery. Everything goes wrong. A set burns down, the townspeople think a real zombie apocalypse might be happening, and all silly stuff. But the crucial message is he's also desperate during a 6-week holiday to find a boyfriend, because he thinks that after he has the surgery, no one will want him. Won't be, you'll have the scar. And I just thought a real lovely, lovable ending to it, accepting himself and all that kind of stuff after he has the surgery. So I'm really hoping that Usborne go for that, because I think it would be lovable and sweet, but also have an important message for kids out there that, I sometimes post pictures of my scar to show people that, we should accept scars. I always say scars tell a story. Affection, in inverted commas, has no stories to tell. It's boring, it's bland, whereas, you've lived, you've got something going on there. So, but yeah, so I've sent the pitch for that, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that'll be a great one to write if possible.
I'm looking forward to reading it already, so hopefully. Although
I just love to write something that is just, so obviously in the Jericho books, there's murder, mayhem, people's eyes are scooped out. It's kind of like very dark. With both of these, the Outrage and Hideous Beauty, they're kind of they're dark stories. There's a dark center to the heart of them, and it's about people. But I just like to write something that is joyous, just funny and silly and joyous, but has a swoony kind of love story, but has this important message at the heart of it as well.
Well, I don't think I have any more questions for you, unless you think there's anything that I haven't asked you that you want to tell us.
Oh God, no, that's an invitation for confessions that you don't want to hear.
Absolutely, too right.
No, I think, well, the only thing is, I guess I can tell you when, did I tell you when the Outrage was coming out? I can't remember, but.
Yeah, May something, I've forgotten already.
13th of May,
13th,
which is a Thursday, thank goodness, and not a Friday. So, and obviously the Jericho books are just available through Amazon. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
You're very welcome. I've been looking forward to this one for ages.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And thank you. Yeah, thanks for the very kind things you said about Hideous Beauty and Jericho and stuff.
Of course. And I've got my copy of The Outrage pre-ordered as well. So
wonderful. Thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing what you think. It's always scary for a writer when people have liked their books, and really enjoyed them, because there will come a point where, because just the law of averages, where I'm going to write something that disappoints you. So it's like, oh no, I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, well, I'll let you know anyway, either way.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
And before we go, do you just want to tell everyone where they can find more about you?
Yes, so on the Will Harker books, I've got a website, willharker.com, and you can sign up for a newsletter there, which has kind of exclusive content in it, and like photographs. A recent one that went out, it's got photographs of traveling fairground and my family and stuff, which inspired Jericho. If you sign up, you also get a free short story which is set in a Victorian Jericho fairground and involves, well, the serial killer. The title gives it away, but it involves the solution to my solution to the serial killer mystery of all time. So you get that for free if you sign up at Will Harker. WilliamHussey.co.uk is for the YA books, and yeah, and then you'll just be sick of me anyway, so you won't find out anymore. Oh, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram as well. I Hussey author on both of those.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Donna. Take care. Thanks, everyone.